The studio lights of America's Got Talent shimmered across the massive auditorium as a small figure stepped slowly into the center of the stage. It was a 12-year-old Filipino boy named Eli Fernando, a soft-spoken kid from the busy streets of Quezon City. His sneakers made barely a sound on the floor, but the weight of the moment felt heavy on his tiny shoulders. The crowd's murmurs softened as they watched him walk in, noticing the gentle tremble in his hands and the way he kept adjusting the collar of his worn, neatly pressed shirt. He looked like someone who had carried too many dreams for someone his age. Eli stood behind the microphone, eyes lowered, taking a deep breath as if gathering every ounce of courage he had. Simon Cowell's eyebrows lifted slightly. The boy's posture, his quiet energy, and the way he clutched the mic for security, everything about him suggested shyness, not power. The judges waited, expecting something small, something timid, maybe a sweet little audition from a kid with a simple voice. But something in Eli's presence made Simon lean forward, almost intrigued by a feeling he couldn't explain. When Sofia Vergara asked for his name, his voice cracked just a bit before settling. "My name is Eli," he said softly. "I'm from Quezon City, Philippines." A few people in the audience smiled warmly, recognizing his accent, whispering their support. Asked why he came to the show, Eli hesitated, then confessed with a shaky breath. "I want to help my family. I want to show that even a kid like me can dream big." His honesty disarmed the room. The words didn't sound rehearsed. They came straight from a place of longing. As the music cue finally played, Eli closed his eyes. He inhaled slowly, as though pulling the entire world into his lungs. Then, with a calm exhale, he released the first note. The entire AGT auditorium froze. From the small body of this shy Filipino child came a voice so powerful, so impossibly rich, that the shock rippled across the crowd in an instant. The note soared effortlessly, smooth, controlled, mature beyond anything anyone could have expected. A collective gasp spread among the audience. A woman in the front row covered her mouth with both hands. A man behind her whispered, "No way! No way that came from him!" Simon's jaw loosened. There was no smirk, no skepticism, just stunned stillness. His eyes widened as he watched Eli transform before him. This wasn't the voice of a quiet boy from the Philippines. This was the voice of someone born with a gift that defied explanation. Eli continued singing, his tone bending and rising like golden waves. Each word carried emotion, depth, and passion, something even adult performers struggle to command. The judges, known for seeing thousands of talents each season, looked as if time had stopped. Heidi leaned forward, her eyes glistening. Sophia whispered, "Incredible," not realizing her mic picked it up. Howie stared at the stage like he was witnessing a miracle unfold. And still, Eli sang. Every note seemed to climb higher, pushing through the walls of the theater, shaking the audience at their core. People stood without meaning to. Filipinos in the crowd felt pride swell in their chests. This was their kababayan, a child representing the heart of the Philippines on the world's biggest stage. The more he sang, the more he bloomed, as though the stage lights fed his confidence. By the time he reached the climax of the song, Eli's voice exploded in a breathtaking final note that echoed like a bell across the entire room, holding steady, pure, and impossibly strong. And then silence, absolute, stunned silence, before anything else could follow. Simon Cowell sat frozen in his chair, his eyes locked onto the small Filipino boy standing on the AGT stage. It wasn't the usual kind of attention he gave. This was different. His face, normally sharp and unreadable, softened into pure astonishment. It was as if his mind couldn't fully process what he had just heard. Eli Fernando, only 12 years old, had just delivered a vocal performance powerful enough to silence an entire theater of thousands. The kind of silence that doesn't come from confusion, but from shock so deep that the world briefly forgets how to react. Simon's fingers, which usually tapped impatiently on the desk, didn't move. His chest barely rose as he breathed. For the first time in a long time, Simon Cowell couldn't speak, couldn't joke, couldn't critique. He simply stared, caught in a moment that felt unreal. The audience looked at him, almost waiting for him to blink, because if Simon didn't move, nobody dared to move either. Eli stood on the stage with his hands still trembling, his breath uneven from the emotional high of singing his heart out. He glanced at the judges' table, unsure whether he had amazed them or shocked them into confusion. The intense silence made his throat tighten again. He wondered, did he do something wrong? Did he sing too loud? Too strong? The boy's eyes shimmered under the lights as his chest tightened with nerves. But then, Simon slowly leaned back in his chair, still staring in disbelief. His mouth finally parted, not for a critique, but for a whisper. "What just happened?" His voice wasn't directed at anyone, more like a stunned question to the universe itself. How could a child so timid, so small, deliver a voice that could tear through the walls of the theater and carve itself into the memory of everyone present? Sophia leaned towards Simon with wide eyes. "Simon, he's unbelievable." Simon didn't respond. He remained stiff, trying to process the moment. Heidi was already wiping the corner of her eye, overwhelmed by the purity of the performance. Howie, usually quick with jokes, sat speechless, shaking his head slowly, as if trying to wake himself from a dream. The camera zoomed in on Simon, capturing the rare moment when the toughest judge on television had completely dropped his guard. For once, there was no criticism hiding behind his stare, only admiration and disbelief. His chest rose in a slow breath, as though he was grounding himself back into reality. The audience finally found their voices again. A wave of gasps, cheers, and emotional cries erupted from every corner of the auditorium. Someone shouted, "Go Philippines!" and a section of the crowd proudly waved small Philippine flags. A woman from Cebu covered her face, crying openly as she watched her kababayan stun the world. As the applause grew, Simon still didn't clap. Not because he didn't want to, but because he literally couldn't. His hands remained still on the desk, frozen from the intensity of the moment. He whispered, that voice isn't normal." He shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of disbelief and deep respect. "He's not just talented. He's extraordinary." Eli, still catching his breath, blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. The boy who had walked in quietly, almost invisible, now held the entire room, including Simon Cowell, completely captive. And as the applause thundered louder, Simon finally exhaled, leaned forward, and said with genuine awe, "You're something we don't see in a lifetime." The world had just witnessed a miracle, and Simon Cowell knew it. The applause was still roaring through the AGT theater when Simon Cowell finally pushed back his chair and rose to his feet. His movements were slow, almost dramatic, but not because he intended them to be. He was genuinely overwhelmed. The crowd fell into another hush as they watched him stand. Even Eli Fernando, still trembling on the stage, didn't know what was happening. All he saw was Simon walking toward the center of the judges' table, eyes never leaving him, as if drawn by something he couldn't ignore. Eli's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. His small chest rose and fell in quick breaths, his nerves returning with twice the intensity. He didn't understand what Simon was doing, but he felt the electricity spreading through the room, every second stretching longer than the last. The lights above him glimmered like stars, and the stage beneath his feet felt suddenly too big, too bright, too unreal. Simon rested both hands on the desk and stared at the young Filipino boy, his voice deep and steady as it echoed through the theater. "Eli," he said, pausing as if searching for the right words, "you're not just a kid from the Philippines. You are a world-class phenomenon." The crowd erupted again, unable to hold back their cheers. Eli felt a tear slip down his cheek before he could stop it. Simon continued, his voice filled with an emotion rarely heard from him. "Voices like yours," he said slowly, "appear once in a generation. And tonight, you changed everything." The moment those words left his mouth, the other judges nodded in agreement, still visibly moved. Sophia placed a hand on her chest, whispering, "He deserves it." Heidi's eyes glistened with tears she didn't bother to hide. Howie smiled with pure pride, shaking his head in disbelief. Eli's breathing became unsteady. He wanted to speak, to thank them, but his voice wouldn't come out. His vision blurred slightly as he scanned the audience. Dozens of people were crying. Many stood waving small Philippine flags. Some shouted his name. Others simply held their hands to their faces, speechless. For the first time in his life, Eli wasn't invisible. He wasn't the quiet kid from Quezon City who sang only in cramped rooms and noisy streets. He was a star, whether he realized it or not. And then it happened. Simon looked down at his hand, as though making a decision that carried the weight of fate itself. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his arm. The crowd screamed even before he touched the button. Eli's knees weakened as he realized what was about to happen. The world seemed to stop. Every sound faded. Every face blurred. All he could see was Simon Cowell's hand hovering above the golden buzzer. Then, boom! Simon slammed the golden buzzer with all his force. A blast of golden light burst across the stage. Confetti cannons fired, sending thousands of sparkling golden pieces raining down from the ceiling like a shimmering storm. The music surged, powerful and triumphant. The audience exploded into a frenzy of cheers, screams, and applause. Eli's hands shot to his face as tears streamed uncontrollably. His small body shook as he sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the moment. From backstage, his mother and father ran out, crying and laughing at the same time. They wrapped him in a tight embrace as golden confetti showered over them, clinging to their hair, their clothes, their tears. Simon watched with a soft smile, the rare kind he saved for moments that would be remembered for years. He knew this was one of them. Eli had not just earned a golden buzzer, he had earned his place in history. And as the golden rain continued to fall, the world realized that a Filipino kid had just stunned the planet.